where top Pentagon leaders are set to give their first public testimony since the US completed its withdrawal from Afghanistan. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin and General Mark Milley, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, are expected to face sharp questions over the next few hours about the final chaotic days of the pullout from Kabul. The Pentagon leaders are testifying before the Senate Armed Services Committee today, and then they'll be back on Capitol Hill tomorrow to appear before the House Armed Services Committee. General Frank McKenzie, who oversaw the withdrawal as head of US Central Command in Doha, is also testifying. Issues to be scrutinized in the hearing include the suicide bombing at Kabul airport on August the 26th. 169 Afghans were killed in that attack. It also claimed the lives of 13 American troops. The Senate will also seek information about the decision-making that took place over the summer as it became apparent that the Taliban were overwhelming Afghan forces, and whether there is any real plan or strategy now for defending the United States going forward. The withdrawal ended the longest war in American history after billions of dollars were spent and thousands of lives were lost. We can expect the testimony of those witnesses to get underway at any moment now, but let's take you live to Capitol Hill, where the proceedings are getting underway. Senator Jack Reed, a Democrat from Rhode Island, the chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee.
Sanctuary inside Pakistan with time and space to regroup. More recently, the Taliban's resurgence can be tied to the flawed Doha Agreement, which then President Trump signed in 2020. This deal, negotiated between the Trump administration and the Taliban, without our coalition allies or even the Afghan government present, promised the end of the entire international presence in Afghanistan, including contractors critical to keeping the Afghan Air Force in the fight, with virtually no stipulations. The Taliban, with momentum on the battlefield and no incentives to honor the Doha Agreement, used the final year of the Trump administration to boldly escalate violence and begin its fateful march toward Kabul. Despite colossal efforts over multiple administrations, both Democratic and Republican, we were unable to help build an Afghan government capable of leading its people, nor an Afghan security force capable of defeating the Taliban. Afghan soldiers fought bravely in the face of massive casualties, but faced with the loss of American military support and hamstrung by corruption within, they were unable to stand on their own against Taliban forces. Secretary Austin, General Milley, General McKenzie, you have each led troops in combat in Afghanistan, commanded at the theater level, and advised our nation's top leaders on our Afghanistan strategy. You have played significant roles throughout this war, and I hope that you are forthcoming in your answers today. To begin, I would ask that you provide an accounting of the intelligence and other key assessments that factored into your judgments about the viability of the Afghan government and Afghan forces and how those trends changed over time. I'd like to know any lessons you have identified for how we can more effectively work by, with, and through partner nation forces in the future. Additionally, I would like to understand what factors you attribute to the Taliban's success and whether we missed indicators and warnings of their imminent takeover. Finally, while we have transitioned our military from Afghanistan after largely achieving our counterterrorism objectives, we must continue to ensure that Afghanistan can never again be used as a base for terrorist groups to conduct operations against the United States and our allies. We must remain vigilant about these threats and ensure that we establish an effective counterterrorism architecture moving forward. To that end, I would ask that you update the committee on your plans for over-the-horizon counterterrorism operations. The United States faces new and evolving threats around the world. To overcome them, we must first understand what went wrong to our mission in Afghanistan and learn from those missteps. We owe it to the American people. I want to thank you again for being here this morning, and I look forward to your testimony. Now, before I turn to the ranking member in for the benefit of my colleagues, because we have 2 rounds of open testimony and a closed session following, I will strictly enforce the 5-minute limit allowed for each member. I intend to recess at 1 p.m. for lunch and promptly resume at
Senator Jack
1:30.
Reed, a Democrat who chairs the Senate Armed Services Committee, getting what we think is going to be a very dramatic day on Capitol Hill underway here in Washington, D.C. Listening into all of that, WION's U.S. correspondent Susan Tarani, who joins me now live. And Susan, it was pretty evident there from the opening statement that Senator Jack Reed made that he definitely, a Democrat, seems to think that these military leaders have got some substantial questions to answer, not just about what went wrong with the Afghan military withdrawal, but also about what comes next there.
Absolutely, Simon. And this, is going to really be a contentious day on Capitol Hill. But something is clear from that introductory statement, and the Democrats will really focus on the 20-year war in Afghanistan, while the Republicans, I think, today will focus on the botched nature of withdrawal and this administration's handling of the withdrawal of Afghanistan mostly. But yes, both sides have a lot of issues that they want to get to, mostly not only the chaotic withdrawal, but also these military officials and also Lloyd Austin will be pressed on the future of counterterrorism measures and how safe America will be now that perhaps in earnest Afghanistan will be a safe haven for terrorism. Lawmakers will also want to see why there was a failure in intelligence in that drone strike that ultimately killed 10 Afghan civilians, including children. And what about those weapons that were left behind on the part of the military? That all goes, of course, under the rubric of the botched military withdrawal, and we'll definitely hear questions from the Republicans, notably from General Milley, on that conversation he had with a Chinese military official that we heard about in revelations of a recent book by Bob Woodward and Robert Costa, who said that he somewhat warned the Chinese during the Trump administration that there won't be some kind of ad hoc attack from the United States against China. But also, in dealing with Russia, the Wall Street Journal recently reported that General Milley had a 6-hour conversation with a Russian intelligence official in Helsinki, and they talked about perhaps some sort of U.S.-Russia cooperation in Afghanistan. That's something that Republican lawmakers since yesterday have been talking about and are concerned about, and a top Senate Republican on this committee, Oklahoma Senator Jim Inhofe, he sent a letter to the Pentagon. This letter needs a response by October 8th. I do apologize. There's an NYPD.
No problem at all. We've got sirens in the background there as Susan Tarani tries to talk to us from New York. But Susan, let me push you about another issue that I think we may hear quite a lot about over the course of the next few hours. And that is the decision to close Bagram Air Force Base, because critics of the Biden administration are sure to question, particularly General Mark Milley, very sharply about that. Why close Bagram if you knew that an evacuation was going to be required, and then you dramatically and rapidly had to stand things up at Kabul International Airport? That's got to be a pretty rich seam for Republicans to mine today.
Absolutely. And, Bagram really goes at the forefront and at the center of this botched withdrawal on the part of this administration. And in that conversation will come the question on whether or not it was the decision of the commander-in-chief to do that and go ahead and close Bagram, which eventually led perhaps to Americans being stranded in Afghanistan. And the question following up to that is, why did you evacuate the military before you evacuated American citizens? Was that the decision of the Commander-in-Chief Joe Biden? Did he bypass, for example, General Milley's recommendation on keeping Bagram open? Or was that the decision of the U.S. military and the Pentagon to close Bagram? And I think that'll be central in that question as well, on how much coordination and collaboration was between the executive branch and the military. And they would want answers to that as well, whether President Biden ignited their recommendations on Afghanistan at the end of the day.
No question about it. Lots of intensity ahead in these hearings in the hours moving forward. Susan Tehrani, live for us in New York today. Thanks very much indeed for that. And we will, of course, be keeping a close eye on those hearings throughout the day here on WION.